The moment the heroine appeared, everyone was waiting for me to become a joke, because I was impossibly spoiled. Towards the male lead, my words were either curses or commands. When I was in a good mood, he wasn't allowed in my bed. When I was in a bad mood, he wasn't even allowed in the house. So, on the second day after the hero and heroine met, I was already dragging my suitcase, preparing to run for my life, but I never expected to be cornered by him before I even left the house. His eyes swept over my suitcase, and a flicker of darkness passed through them. He spoke to me, his voice gentle and slow. I've already replaced my female assistant at the company with a man. My sister can't stand you, so I sent her abroad on a private jet. That German shepherd you liked. It will be delivered to the house tomorrow. He paused, staring straight into my eyes. What's the cruelest thing done to you in the name of love? Tell me below. First, the heart breaks, then, karma breaks them. If you're still angry, I'll continue sleeping in the garage tonight. He took my hand, his grip gentle but firm, leaving no room for refusal. But the thought of leaving me, you're not allowed to have it. Not for a second. I transmigrated into this book, and the system demanded I play the villainess. It ordered me to torment the male lead and belittle him, before the heroine appeared, forcing him to live a life of humiliation and degradation by my side. Then, when the heroine arrived, she would be the one to save the beautiful, tragic, and powerful male lead. He would begin to resist, to fight back, and to build his own empire. Hand in hand with the destined heroine, he would greet his happy ending, and I, along with everyone else who had ever humiliated him, would be nothing but a stepping stone on their path to true love. When I arrived, it was the very day my father brought him home. I was the pampered daughter of a wealthy family, and he, at that moment, was just a nameless little stray. Dressed in a magnificent gown, I stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down on the filthy, skeletal boy below. The system said, "Smash the hot milk in your hand onto his face." This was my opening act of intimidation, a signal of my immediate disgust. I tightened my grip on the warm glass. "Milk is slippery," I asked the system. "Smashing it on his face won't hurt enough," I said. "I'll pour it down his throat instead. Scald his throat so he can't eat or speak." The system seemed to think I was a quick learner. "Acceptable," it said. Satisfied, I descended the stairs until I stood before him. Up close, his dark, black eyes were even more intense. They stared right at me, devoid of any emotion. I frowned with cold disdain and grabbed the back of his neck. "Who gave you permission to look at me?" Before he could react, I forced the entire glass of imported milk down his throat. Under the system's watchful gaze, I poured it quickly, almost violently. When I let go, he collapsed to the ground, clutching his throat, choking and coughing for a long time. I stood over him and wiped the mud from my palm all over his face, making his already dirty face even filthier. The system commanded, "Insult him." "Can I call him a dog?" I asked. "Permitted," the system replied. "Are you a little stray dog?" I asked the boy on the floor. "You're so dirty." Through his violent coughing, he lifted his reddened eyes to look at me. I smiled at him. "Don't you dare spit a single drop out," I said, "or else, I'll feed you something else." He lowered his head without a word, even his ragged coughs falling silent. "You don't even have a name, do you?" I prodded his forehead with the tip of my shoe. "I'll give you a name. You'll take my family name. My name is Pearl Jeong." I followed the system's prompt and spoke the male lead's new name. "From now on, you will be Ash Jeong." Translator's note: the original name Hue means filth dirt. That was my first meeting with Ash, more than a decade ago. The system demanded I maintain the most vicious attitude towards him, at all times. So, for the first 2 years he was in my home, I forced him to do countless things, venting all my frustrations on him. I was a delicate young lady with more allergies than foods I could eat. At the dinner table, all the seafood and fruits I couldn't touch were dumped into Ash's bowl. My father was always busy with his work. He hired a private doctor to look after my health, but the medicine was always too bitter. So, I would count out all the colorful, potent pills and, one by one, toss them into Ash's mouth like I was shooting baskets. His throat was narrow, and he would turn pale trying to swallow them. I would then stroke his short black hair and threaten him. "If you dare tell Dad or Dr. Evans about this," I'd smile and say, "then I'll use a razor blade to slit your throat." After my threat, I was about to pull my hand away. "You faint at the sight of blood," Ash suddenly spoke. It was the first time I had ever heard his voice, the first time he'd spoken in the nearly 2 years he'd been with me. His voice was slightly hoarse, on the cusp of changing. I froze, looking up at him. After nearly 2 years of being pushed into bathtubs and swimming pools, he had long been washed clean of all the filth. standing before me now. His skin was 2 shades paler than mine, making his dark eyes, fixed on me, seem especially black. So you're not a mute, huh? I leaned in closer. The system said, he deceived you. You should be angry, slap him. I took a step back to stand up, but I accidentally bumped the service bell behind me. Footsteps immediately sounded outside. Dr. Evans was coming from the next room. I apologized to the system in my mind, feeling a pang of panic. Its mechanical voice was ice cold. Dr. Evans will open the door in 5 seconds. That is enough time for you to kick him to the floor. I whispered a soft okay and gathered my strength. I swung my leg back, but just as the tip of my shoe touched Ash's knee, a sharp pain shot through my ankle. I'd sprained it. I instinctively grabbed Ash's shoulder to steady myself. In that same instant, I used his shoulder as leverage to guide his fall to the soft cashmere rug on my right. When Dr. Evans opened the door, Ash was already sitting on the floor, and I was clutching my ankle, wincing by the side of the bed. What happened here? Dr. Evans asked, surprised. I glanced at Ash, warning him with my eyes to stay silent. He met my gaze calmly and stood up on his own, not saying a word. I sprained my ankle. Dr. Evans. Ash was trying to help me up, I said with disgust, but he's so useless. He couldn't even keep his own balance. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that Ash's face was still a mask of indifference. Even my jumbled, shifting explanation didn't cause a ripple in his expression. The old butler once told me that Ash wasn't just some random boy my father picked up. He was the illegitimate son of my father's sworn enemy, lost and living on the streets. My father, ever the strategist, found him and brought him under his control. Publicly, he treated Ash like a benevolent father, but privately, he denied him any education, vowing to raise him into a brainless fool. But I wanted to study even less than he was allowed to. My health had always been poor. My father doted on me and hired private tutors instead of sending me to school, but the high school curriculum was painfully dull. I didn't want to read, do homework, or listen to lectures, so I made Ash hide in the wardrobe and listen to the lessons for me. Afraid he wouldn't be able to breathe, I left a narrow crack in the wardrobe door. If I angled my head just right, I could meet his eyes in the darkness. During class, I would pretend to be a diligent, obedient student, but after class, all the assignments from the different tutors were completed by Ash. Of course, I didn't stop exploiting him even then. I would lie on his lap, my feet up, playing games on my phone while he worked. I'd complain, my head hurts. Ash, use your right hand to massage my head, and write with your left. Ash's hand paused. As I lay on his lap, he was, for a rare moment, in a position above me. We looked at each other, me looking up, him looking down. I saw my own bossy face reflected in his dark pupils. In the blink of an eye, for years had passed since he came to my home. Perhaps Ash truly possessed some kind of male lead halo. He was maturing at an astonishing rate. He was taller, his shoulders broader, his legs longer. My head rested against his abdomen, and I could feel the lean, powerful muscle beneath his shirt. His face had lost its childish softness, replaced by sharp, defined angles. The only thing that hadn't changed was, perhaps, his perpetually calm expression. We stared at each other in silence for a full 30 seconds. He didn't move. I frowned, growing impatient, and called his name coldly. Ash. I saw the line of his throat move, the slight bob of his Adam's apple above his collar. It was surprisingly sensual. I narrowed my eyes, sat up, and pressed my fingertips against it. I stared straight at him and asked, Ash, what are you thinking? He's growing up, the system said coolly. He's starting to develop a will to resist. I looked into Ash's deep, dark eyes. Perhaps he had never truly submitted at all. He just used a mask of silence to hide everything he was thinking. But I wouldn't argue with the system. It wanted me to punish Ash for his disobedience. It said, don't forget your role, be harsher. I bit my lip, then suddenly reached up and grabbed a handful of his short hair. He didn't resist, letting his head tilt back with my pull, but his eyes remained fixed on me. I placed my foot on his knee and looked down at him. Ash, have you already forgotten how to understand my words? I circled his exposed neck with my right hand, squeezing so hard the bones on the back of my hand stood out. You're just a dog my father raised for me, I whispered in his ear, and a dog must know its master. It must obey. The system had been with me since I arrived in this world. Over time, I'd figured out its patterns. Its hearing was excellent, but its sight was surprisingly poor. So, it couldn't see that my right hand, hidden from its view, was actually hovering a hair's breadth away from his skin. I was only straining against my own hand. When I pulled my hand away, There wasn't a single red mark on Ash's pale neck. I shoved him off the bed. "I don't want to see you today. Get out." With my back to him, I heard him silently get up from the floor. His gaze, almost a physical weight, rested on my back for a moment before he finally opened the door and left. I sat there and gently flexed my reddened knuckles, hidden inside my sleeve. The system's voice echoed in my ear, confused. "You were choking him for so long. Why didn't he even cough?" My heart skipped a beat, but I feigned ignorance. "Maybe. I used to pour things down his throat so much when he was little. His throat is just more durable now." During the spring festival of my 17th year, my father suddenly brought up the topic of university. He wanted me to take the National College Entrance exam that summer. "All your tutors say you're clever. Dad wants you to give it a try," he said, patting my head. "No pressure. If you do well, we have more options. If not, Dad will just send you abroad." I tossed my spoon into the bowl, putting on a spoiled air. "Taking a test is one thing, but I've never been to a real school. I won't fit in." My father smiled and glanced at Ash across the table. "Let Ash go with you. He's a year older. Isn't he your big brother?" My father was a true smiling tiger. For the 8 years Ash had been with us, he grandly referred to Ash as his eldest son and my brother, in front of outsiders. But in reality, Ash had almost no freedom in this house, let alone equal treatment. I scoffed. "He doesn't know anything. How is he supposed to accompany me to study?" "You don't need to worry about that," my father said, claiming he had a plan. I frowned. "Don't you dare just make him my bodyguard. That's so embarrassing." "Of course not. Of course not." My father seemed amused. He patted my back soothingly. "Besides the exam, there are plenty of other ways to get into a good university." I was immediately dissatisfied. "So I have to get in with my exam score. But Ash gets to tag along without doing anything," I said angrily. "No way. Ash has to take the exam too." My father was exasperated. "He doesn't know anything. How can he take it?" "I don't care," I said, acting imperious. "If I'm taking it, he has to take it too." My father and I decided Ash's future in a few sentences. From beginning to end, Ash sat across from us, but we never asked for his opinion. I glanced at him, because it was the festival. I had forced him to wear a rare red sweater, which made his skin look even paler. He sat there, his gaze lowered to the soup in his bowl, his expression a mask of detached indifference, as if our conversation had nothing to do with him. My gaze lingered on him for a moment. He sensed it and looked up, his dark, arresting eyes meeting mine. I quickly looked away. That summer, in the examination hall, Ash's seat was right behind mine. Before the test, I had threatened him in every way imaginable, but he calmly agreed to switch exam papers with me. In the end, I entered university with his top score results, and he, with a spot my father had bought for a 7-figure sum, entered the international department of the same school. The system praised me. It said, "I once had a host with a similar mission, but she couldn't do anything. She wouldn't bully people, said cheating was against her conscience. I told her to slap someone, and she couldn't even bring herself to do it." "What happened to her?" I asked. The system's voice was frigid. "She died." As it said that, I was sitting in a university lecture hall. I sent Ash a curt text, telling him to come and sit through my major course for me. He was punctual, dressed in all black. He caused a stir even when he slipped in quietly through the back door. I sat there lazily, narrowing my eyes at how much attention he drew. I pinched his chin and made him look at the front row. "That girl has been staring at you," I asked with a sneer. "Aren't you going to go say hello?" Ash didn't even glance at the front row. His eyes moved, but only to focus on me. Up close, his pupils were a translucent black, his long lashes slightly lowered, partially obscuring his gaze. He was a man of few words. "No." In class, the white-haired old professor lectured on and on about international trade. I was drowsing off. I tilted my head and fell asleep on Ash's shoulder. After years of exploiting him, using him as a human pillow was a skill I had perfected. He was always docile, at least on the surface, and rarely resisted me in these matters, so I leaned on him naturally, and he didn't struggle. But I had forgotten we were in a lecture hall with nearly 300 people. I buried my head in his shoulder and truly fell asleep. So I didn't see the girl in the front row, the one with a crush on him, turn around to stare at us with a look of shock and disappointment. And I didn't see Ash lift his gaze, his cold stare alone enough to ward off the curious glances from all the other students. When the bell rang, the system woke me up on cue. I rubbed my neck and stood up, shoving all my books and notes across the desk for Ash to clean up. I looked towards the back of the room, where a fashionably dressed boy was waiting. I said to Ash, "Don't follow me tonight. Get lost." Ash, who was closing a book, looked up and followed my gaze to the door. I was about to walk away, carefree, when a hand suddenly grabbed my arm. "Where are you going?" Ash asked, his grip firm on my wrist. It was the first time he had ever questioned me like that. I turned, stunned. The system warned, "Watch your expression." I pursed my lips and immediately put on an annoyed frown. I tried to pull my arm away but found that even though he wasn't using much force, I couldn't break free. "Ash," I said coldly, "let go of me." For once, he was stubborn. He stared at me and asked again, "I asked you where you're going." As we spoke, the boy from the door, a cocky young master named Leo, had already sauntered in with his group of friends. Leo was the designated male villain in the original book, a perfect match for my villainous role, and one of the characters who would be brutally crushed by Ash later on. The moment he saw us, he aimed a kick at Ash. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" But just as his foot was about to connect, I raised my free hand and slapped Ash's shoulder, intentionally pushing him out of the way. I knew the difference in our strength was massive, but thankfully, he went with the force. Stumbling aside, Leo's kick missed, sending a chair clattering to the floor. The loud noise made everyone who was left in the room turn to look, furious that he'd missed. Leo marched over and shoved Ash hard against the wall. "What the hell are you so arrogant for? Everyone knows you're just a dog raised by Mr. Jiang," he yelled, humiliating Ash in front of everyone. But Ash acted as if he hadn't heard a word. He was still gripping my wrist tightly, his gaze locked on me. Finally, I twisted my arm. I glanced at him and whispered, in a voice only we could hear, "Let me go." He stared at me for another second before finally releasing his grip. The moment he did, Leo's friend shoved him against the back wall. This was for real. The curious student scrambled to get out. I stood there, arms crossed, leaning against a desk and pretending to watch the drama unfold. With lazy indifference, I deliberately avoided Ash's eyes. I had seen Ash, in our home gym, calmly take down a towering professional trainer my father hired for me. These few boys surrounding him now wouldn't even be a warm-up, but from beginning to end, Ash showed no sign of fighting back. According to the original plot, the male lead was still in his phase of being bullied. He shouldn't, and couldn't, fight back now, but I could lie to the system. I couldn't lie to myself. Ash had long been more than capable. He had never truly feared me. He was always perfectly lucid. At that moment, I couldn't stop myself from looking at him again. It was as if he had been watching me the whole time. The second I looked, I fell into his black eyes. His gaze was dark and deep, as if he knew nothing, and yet, knew everything. "Don't hit his hands," I suddenly said to the group. "If his hands are broken, who's going to do my homework?" One of the boys moved to kick Ash's leg. I clicked my tongue. "Are you idiots? If you cripple him, who's going to run my errands every day?" I deliberately looked up at the security camera in the corner of the room. "Don't cause trouble for my dad." With that, I stormed out, feigning anger. Leo immediately ran after me. Pearl, don't be angry." When we got downstairs, I finally stopped. Leo smiled obsequiously, trying to take my hand. "Don't be mad, I'll tell them to back off." I dodged his hand. "Do you ever use your brain?" I poked his forehead. "You're going to beat someone up in a classroom, in broad daylight." He tried to grab my hand again, but I dodged him again. He apologized profusely, and then, seizing an opportunity, finally managed to catch my fingers. The warmth and scent of a strange man washed over me. I swallowed, forcing down my discomfort, but Leo wasn't satisfied. He leaned in, trying to kiss my cheek. I turned my face to avoid him, but as I turned, my vision went dark. I had collided with a man's chest. A familiar scent enveloped me, and my free wrist was captured in a firm grip. It was Ash. He had pulled me into his arms, shielding me completely from Leo. His action thoroughly enraged Leo. In a fit of fury, he and his friends cornered Ash in a deserted alley behind the school. On a rainy night, I stood at the mouth of the alley with an umbrella, listening to the sickening thud of fists hitting flesh. The system ordered me to stay put. It said, "This is something the male lead must endure." It said, "The times you've covered for him in the past, as long as they didn't affect the plot, I could turn a blind eye, but this time, you cannot interfere." So the system knew all along. It knew about my deliberate actions, my deceptions. Then what about Ash? Why wasn't he fighting back? He had the ability to resist. Why, except when it came to me, did he still refuse to defend himself? He just stood there, leaning against the wall, letting their fists rain down on him. But even as he was being beaten, there wasn't a trace of vulnerability on his face. He was still cold, almost disdainful, as he watched them. Leo, predictably, was enraged by Ash's gaze once more. This time, he pulled a dagger from his pocket. The sharp tip gleamed silver in the dark. I stared at the dagger and said to the system, "We can't let them kill him. If Ash dies, the plot can't proceed." The system finally relented with a cold acknowledgement. I ran. The second before Leo's blade could break Ash's skin, I intercepted his arm. The dagger clattered to the ground. I supported Ash and looked at Leo's twisted face. "Are you insane?" Leo's anger hadn't subsided. He raised his foot to kick Ash again. As he did, I slapped him across the face. This wasn't a fake slap, like the ones I performed for the system. I used all my strength. Leo's head snapped to the side. Ash, who had been slumped against my shoulder as if unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at Leo, and the corner of his bleeding mouth curved into a smile. I ignored Leo and said over my shoulder, "Get lost." Since the system already knew the truth, I had no desire to act with Leo anymore. His father worked for my father. He wouldn't dare cross me. He just stormed off with his friends. Furious, the rain fell harder, leaving just Ash and me in the old alley. He was semi-conscious and burning with fever, leaning his full weight against me, whether intentionally or not. Looking at his bruised and battered state, I decided not to argue. I just supported him and walked towards the mouth of the alley. Luckily, he wasn't a complete dead weight, and we made it out and got a taxi easily. I took Ash to the hospital. I waited outside the examination room for 2 hours, until the doctor came out and told me that none of his vital organs or bones were damaged. By then, the rain on my clothes had dried. I ran a hand through my messy hair, paid with my card, and was about to leave. "Aren't you going to stay and take care of him?" the doctor called after me. "He may not have internal injuries, but he'll need to rest and be looked after for a while." I tilted my head, thought for a moment, and said, "Then hire a nurse for him." When I got home that night, I came down with a high fever. I had transmigrated into the body of a sickly, beautiful villainess destined for an early death. This body had been frail since birth. A single rain shower was enough to knock me out for 3 days and 3 nights. In a state between dream and reality, I vaguely saw Ash sitting by my bed. He skillfully helped me up and fed me my medicine. But wasn't Ash in the hospital? My mind worked sluggishly as I instinctively raised a hand to touch the face of the person behind me. "Is it Ash?" The medicine worked fast. The person's hand gently patted my back, and within half a minute, I had fallen back into a deep sleep. It was 2 weeks before I returned to school. Since the system had seen through my charade, I decided to be direct. "My performance has been a disaster." I asked it. "Is there any point in continuing this mission?" The usually strict system was uncharacteristically lenient. As I said, "As long as it doesn't affect the overall plot, I can turn a blind eye." It said I at least had to maintain my persona on the surface to move the plot forward. So, on the day I returned to school, I got a new boyfriend. He was the captain of the school's basketball team. As I sat on the sidelines watching him play, holding a thermos, Ash, whom I hadn't seen in half a month, found me. He was wearing a black trench coat, his tall frame casting a long shadow. He walked up to me, closed my thermos, and grabbed my wrist to pull me away. I tilted my head up to check his injuries. There were no visible marks. As expected of the male lead with a protagonist's halo, his recovery ability was far beyond mine. Ash pulled me to my feet, his eyes locked on my face, and said a single word, "Leave." The system's cool warning sounded in my head. I shoved Ash away. "Ash, stop being crazy." But when Ash was serious, even I was powerless. He was incredibly stubborn, like a dog that had locked onto a bone and would never let go. I pushed and refused him in public, causing a scene. My new boyfriend even ran off the court to defend me. Ash's brow furrowed as he shot my new boyfriend a cold glare. I don't know what kind of look it was, but it was enough to intimidate him from several feet away. Then, in front of everyone, Ash simply lifted me into his arms. He was truly insane. Ignoring my struggles, he carried me to a building out of the main view. He finally set me down, following the system's instructions. I pounded on his shoulder. The obsessive look on his face had vanished, replaced by the same calm he had worn for a decade. He let me yell and hit him, only looking down to tie a thick cashmere scarf around my neck. His cool fingertips lingered on my skin for a moment before he spoke. "Pearl, whatever you want to do to me, I'll take it all." It was the first time he had ever called me by my first name, and the first time he had said so much. He said, "Whatever you want, I will give it to you." His fingertips grasped my chin. "But you are not to date anyone. You are not to look at other men. And you are most certainly not to be with another man," he said. "I won't allow it." His thumb rubbed my lips, a little roughly. "Here, in the shadow of the building, with just the two of us." He leaned in, burying his face in the crook of my neck. "I can't bear it," he said, his voice muffled. He called my name again, repeating his command. "Pearl, I won't allow it." My 4 years of university were Ash's years of dormancy. During that time, while sticking close to me, he spared no effort in building his own power. I still treated him with a bossy, imperious attitude, never giving him a kind word in public or in private, but just as Ash himself had said, he took it all. He silently and calmly accepted all my malice and bad temper, on one condition: I was to have only him by my side. If any other man appeared in my life, he became like a lion whose territory had been invaded, turning into a relentless, obsessive force. Over 4 years, Ash and I became infamous at school. Everyone knew he was the adopted son. Everyone knew I, the Jiang family's daughter, treated him like dirt. Everyone knew his life in our home was one of shame and humiliation. But all of that ended the year I graduated. That year, Ash sent my father to prison. Countless crimes were laid at my father's feet. He was locked away behind bars, with no chance of ever seeing the light of day again. In one move, Ash had flipped the board, becoming the sole master of the vast Jiang family fortune, and he had done it without even being officially recognized by his own birth family yet. The scandal was sensational. People celebrated, people kicked my father while he was down, and even more people watched for the drama to unfold. Everyone was waiting to see how Ash would deal with me. Everyone was waiting for his revenge. But at the peak of the public discussion, Ash walked out of the courthouse in a sharp suit and came straight to the car where I was sitting in the passenger seat. I was dozing off, leaning against the seat. I felt his gaze linger on me for a long time. I felt him take off his own jacket and drape it over me. On the way home, Ash drove, with just the two of us in the car. While waiting at a red light, he suddenly asked, "Will you blame me?" I opened my eyes and looked at the neon lights outside the window. It was strange. After being in this world for so long, perhaps because I had spent the most time with Ash, he was the only one I had developed feelings for. Everyone else, to me, felt more like NPCs, helping me complete my mission. How selfish I was. Even with my nominal father in prison, I felt nothing more than the completion of a plot point. I always said Ash was cold, but I was no different. That night, I never answered his question. Ash, of course, knew I was awake, but he never asked again. While everyone eagerly awaited my downfall, Ash once again did the unexpected. The day after he secured his position as Chairman Jiang, he announced our marriage. He was the chairman. I was no longer his nominal sister. I was his rightful wife, Mrs. Jiang. The news was jaw-dropping. He even kept the villa where I grew up, kept Dr. Evans, kept all the familiar household staff. He continued to wait on me hand and foot, as if terrified of neglecting me, even more so than before. He was a decisive and brilliant leader, far surpassing my father. The company thrived under his management. And so, the stories of my villainy spread even further. They said I was a tyrant, that because I couldn't stand the thought of other women near him, I had forced him to replace all his female staff with men. They said I was spoiled, that I would throw a tantrum during a board meeting, dragging him out to go shopping with me without any regard for the occasion. The rumors swirled, a mix of truth and fiction. Some were things I did deliberately to maintain my character, some were so absurd I laughed when I heard them, and some were started by Ash himself. In truth, from the day Ash sent my father to prison, I had started a countdown in my mind. Ash had risen, the plot had progressed. I knew the heroine was about to appear. She would arrive just in time to save the now blackened Ash from the edge, pulling him back to the righteous path. And my time was up. I didn't even need the system to remind me. I could feel my own health deteriorating. Even without Ash lifting a finger, I didn't have much time left. For some reason, I felt a sense of debt towards him, perhaps because I had bullied him for so many years to complete my mission. So, in the final, less critical stages of the mission, I began to do everything I could to satisfy him, to yield to him. I began to compensate him. He wanted to get married, so we got married. He wanted me by his side every day, so I stayed only with him. Even when he tormented me in bed, I would cry but never push him away. In bed, Ash revealed all his dark facets. He would breathe against my ear and ask if I thought it was unfair. I would look up at him through my tears, not understanding what he meant. He'd say slowly, "You're locked up at home. You only get to see me, but I'm surrounded by female assistants, female secretaries, female directors." He'd lean closer and whisper, "Darling, that's not fair to you." And the next day, he would transfer away all the female staff around him. Ash's mind worked in strange ways. Most of the time, I couldn't figure him out. I just did my best to go along with him. but my constitution was terrible. Often, after a night with him, I wouldn't be able to get up the next day, so occasionally, I would lock him out of the room. If I let him in, I knew I wouldn't get any rest. Although I could foresee that I didn't have long to live, I felt I had to stay with him, at least until the heroine appeared. I had to stay with him until the next person who loved him arrived. When Ash turned 24, he was finally and formally acknowledged by his birth family. The union of the two families expanded his power once more. His biological father, racked with guilt, showered him with compensation, and by extension, I, as his wife, was also well taken care of. Only Ash's sister, perhaps believing the rumors about me, couldn't stand me. She would find every opportunity to make my life difficult, constantly trying to introduce other women to Ash. I didn't care about any of that, but Ash was ruthless. One night, as we held each other in bed, he gently stroked my back and told me his sister wouldn't be returning to the country for at least a decade, that she would never appear before us again. I stared at the rare smile on his lips in the moonlight, and heard his faint laugh. I sent her abroad, he said, without my permission. She can never come back. His fingertips gently traced my lips. Darling, he said, no one gets to bully you. The heroine was supposed to appear on Ash's 25th birthday. She would bump into a drunk Ash at a party, a cliché, but the beginning of their love story. A month before her arrival, I saw a German Shepherd puppy I adored. It was beautiful, gentle, and affectionate. I wanted to buy it for Ash as his 25th birthday gift, but Ash, who usually indulged my every whim, refused for the first time. You're allergic to fur, he said. We can't have a dog in the house. We can just keep it in the courtyard. I argued. It won't come inside. Besides, I won't be here for much longer anyway. But Ash shook his head again. No, he said, taking my hand. Anything that could possibly harm your health will not be in our home. On the night of Ash's birthday, he had a party he couldn't miss. He asked me to wait for him at home so we could celebrate together. That night, I packed a few light things. It was finally the end of the mission, the day I would finally leave Ash. Since our marriage, the system had been silent for a long time, but I knew it was always there. It suddenly spoke, its voice cool. What are you waiting for? It's time for you to leave. I gripped the handle of my suitcase and finally took a step towards the door, but as I opened it, I came face to face with Ash, dressed in a black coat. He had been smiling, an irrepressible joy on his face, but his gaze dropped and landed on the suitcase beside me. The smile vanished. Leaving again? He asked. Again. Why again? I had never left him before. Before I could think, Ash's hand covered mine on the suitcase handle. His palm was cold, his grip tight, but his tone was still gentle. Didn't you want a dog? He asked. I bought the villa next door. We'll keep the dog there. If you want, you can see it through the window. I've already had someone buy the German Shepherd you liked. It will be delivered tomorrow. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead against mine. Will that make you happier? Something about his mood felt deeply strange. I reached up to touch his face. What's wrong with you? Ash smiled and brushed a kiss against my lips. Then, he said something that sent a shockwave through my entire being. I killed Celine. Celine, the long-awaited heroine, Ash's salvation, his fated love. But now, he was telling me, so casually, that he had killed her. A frantic warning blared in my mind from the system. I had to press my hands to my head. You killed her. Why? I asked. Ash had always had eyes like bottomless black pools, holding back countless things beneath a calm surface. He seemed to know nothing, yet he seemed to know everything. At this point, I didn't even have to ask who Celine was, because I knew, and because Ash knew that I knew, so I only asked, why? The wind is cold, Ash said, as if nothing had happened, and adjusted the scarf around my neck. He kicked my suitcase aside and pulled me into the house. The door closed, locking the two of us inside. He sat me down on the sofa, knelt before me, and took both my hands in his. Then he finally began to speak, his voice soft. Darling, he whispered, this is the second time you have come into my world. The first time I saw you, 12 years ago, I recognized you. I remembered everything. He rested his chin gently on my knees and looked up at me. In our last life, you told me you came into my world with a mission. You said I was the male lead, and you were the villainess. You were here to bully me, to torment me. I sat there, utterly stunned, listening to Ash calmly recount this story. Seeing my shock, he even reached up to gently stroke my face, as if to soothe me. But you were too soft-hearted. You couldn't bring yourself to bully me, he said. You never hurt me. You were always protecting me, always saving me, he said. You even fell in love with me. At this, a flicker of darkness crossed his face. You botched the mission completely. So, the system you brought with you, it punished you, he said. It executed you. I blinked, stunned. I remembered what the system had told me years ago, about the host who couldn't complete her mission and died. So that was me, the me from before. Then why am I alive again? I asked, my voice hoarse. Ash smiled. Because I am the male lead, he said. This is my world, I will have control. If they didn't resurrect you, if they didn't send you back to me, I would have destroyed this entire world. He said it so lightly, but it was an act of near self-destruction. To destroy the world, he would first have to destroy himself. Darling, he stroked my face again. Because I am the protagonist of this world, the one I love, is the heroine. Ash knelt closer and placed a solemn kiss on my forehead. The system was screaming urgent warnings in my head, a fatal countdown timer starting to tick. Ash pulled me into a tight embrace, as if trying to merge me with his very bones. He said, as long as I exist, I only want you, no one else. I killed Celine. I only have you by my side. You are my only woman. But it failed, I said. The countdown in my head was accelerating. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I felt my body growing lighter, as if I was about to be pulled from this world at any moment. No wonder I could never bring myself to truly hurt him. No wonder I had schemed to create opportunities for him to become strong and independent, hiding it all from the system. No wonder, in this vast world, he was the only one I had feelings for. No wonder. Ash held me tighter and tighter. He leaned in and kissed the corner of my mouth. You remember my words, he said. As long as I exist, I will do everything in my power to wait for the day we are reunited. He was even smiling now, but from his deep, dark eyes, tears began to fall, landing like hot brands on the back of my hand. In our last life, you left me completely before you were even an adult, he said. This life, I tried so hard to cooperate with you, to help you complete the mission. He was still trying to comfort me. You see, we were together. We made it to my 25th birthday. I don't know when a dagger had appeared in his hand. He held my hands in one of his, and with his free hand, he plunged the blade into his own heart without a moment's hesitation. I shook my head frantically, struggling in his arms for the first time. No, I let out a sharp, mournful cry. I don't want this, but I could never resist his strength. The blade was already buried in his chest. Blood seeped out, staining his white shirt crimson. No, I struggled and cried in vain. Ash, don't do this. My own palms were now stained with his blood. Take me with you, Ash said. A world without you is meaningless to me. In his final moment, Ash kissed my lips. He said to me, I will love you forever. The world before my eyes dissolved into fragments of light and shadow, my sharp cries torn apart by the fracturing reality. I saw my own body fading, as if being extracted from this world. Ash's voice echoed in my ears. He said, I will wait to meet you again. Then, his body went limp and fell. Blood pooled behind him, like a brilliant, blooming flower. It was his final farewell, and his promise to wait. The late summer of September was exceptionally hot. The system told me that today, my father would bring the male lead of this world home. He has appeared, it said. I stood on the stairs and looked down at the unfamiliar boy at the bottom. He was standing under a tree of vibrant red roses. The moment I looked at him, he looked up at me, and from that moment on, his gaze never left me. Who decided that being kind meant being silent? If you've ever had to silence your own voice to keep the peace, or dim your light so others could feel bright, let me know in the comments that you're done playing small. Your truth has a right to take up space, and their karma is long overdue. Subscribe to Red Karma for more stories of unapologetic power. It's your turn to write the ending.